34-year-old Zohran Mamdani has won the New York City mayoral election, defeating former Governor Andrew Cuomo and Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa. While he's the youngest to hold the post in over a century, also the first Indian-origin South Asian mayor. Mamdani's victory comes in the face of fierce attacks on his policies from business elites, conservative media commentators and US President Trump himself. But he had a strong message for Trump in his first address after election.
New York will remain a city of immigrants, a city built by immigrants, powered by immigrants, and as of tonight, led by an immigrant. So hear me, President Trump, when I say this. To get to any of us, you will have to get through all of us.
The turnout was high in this year's vote. New York City Board of Elections said the turnout surpassed the 2 million mark for the first time in more than 3 decades. The statement was issued in a post just before polls closed at 9 p.m. local time, underscoring the scale of public engagements in what turned out to be one of the city's most closely watched and historic elections. Well, Trump made an 11th-hour intervention in the race, urging voters who, he said, really have no choice and must vote for Cuomo. However, Cuomo cleared that the US president didn't support him, but opposed Mamdani. Well, with about 90% of the votes counted, Cuomo trailed far behind with 41.6%, while Mamdani led with 50.4%. Sliwa placed third with 7.1%. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who did not endorse Mamdani until late in the race, cast the results as a verdict on the costs of living. Mamdani will take office on the 1st of January. Now, 3 challenges await him. The first and foremost is delivering on his promises. He has promised universal childcare, freezing rent in subsidized units, free public buses and city-run grocery stores. He says it will be paid by new taxes on millionaires and corporations that will raise $9 billion. Well, the second is taking the incoming fires from Republicans. In his victory speech, Mamdani challenged Trump to turn up the volume. It remains to be seen how a politician with no executive experience will handle the onslaught that's sure to come. Well, the US president has already threatened to pull federal funding, but Mamdani seems undeterred. He in fact addressed Trump with 4 words: turn the volume up.
So Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
In New Jersey, Democratic Party candidate Mickey Sherrill beat out a Trump-backed businessman, and in Virginia, Democratic candidate Abigail Spanberger took back the governor's mansion from the Republicans. Trump, however, takes no blame. In a post on Truth Social, he cited anonymous pollsters suggesting the Republicans' defeat were down to the government shutdown and the fact that his own name wasn't on ballots. High-profile Democrats have sought to frame these elections as a turning point for the party. Former President Barack Obama said the future looks a little brighter after the results, albeit with plenty of work still to be done. And to help us paint a more comprehensive picture, we're now being joined by Jennifer Ewing. She's a spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK, and James Jackson, journalist and political analyst. Welcome both to the broadcast.
Hi.
Thanks.
Zohran Mamdani has made history by becoming the mayor of many firsts. The first New York mayor who's a Muslim, the first South Asian, and also the youngest in more than a century. And many say that his win reflects voter frustration with Donald Trump. Now, James, I want to come to you first. Would you agree that Mamdani's victory is rooted more in anger against Trump than perhaps in local issues?
I'm not sure it's all about Trump. Of course, that was a key factor in the race. We shouldn't forget local issues, but you saw that he called out Donald Trump in his victory speech. And as well as that, the opposition, Andrew Cuomo, was making clear implications that you should vote for Cuomo so that Trump doesn't send troops into New York City. So of course, this was a race between three men, three very interesting characters: Andrew Cuomo, Zoran Mamdani, and Curtis Sliwa, who many Republicans saw as a spoiler candidate. But ultimately, Zoran has reinvented political campaigning, and he's also refused to back down on controversial issues like rent and also Israel. We saw many cases, which of course Donald Trump is a huge supporter of Israel and the Netanyahu government. So we saw many cases where in the New York mayor's debate, they kept asking questions about Israel and where would they first go, if they were elected mayor, where would the candidate's first trip be to? And he brought it back to New York, right? So this was a New York race. Donald Trump is from New York, and as they said in some campaign materials, it's the city that created New York, that created Donald Trump, can be the one that can show how to defeat him.
Right. Jennifer, what's your take on this? We know that Trump has blamed the Republican losses on his absence from the ballot and also the government shutdown. But could it be voter fatigue with Trump himself that gave Mamdani a boost here?
Actually, of the three sort of major races we were looking at last night, say governor in New Jersey, governor in Virginia, and then the New York mayoral race, Trump had the least to impact on the New York mayoral race because the polls, the exit polls, basically asked people how much effect did Trump have on your vote. In Virginia, they said, I believe it was 52%. In New Jersey, it was 51%. And in the Mamdani race, it was 38%. So there was a lot more going on in the New York City mayoral race. I think it comes down to affordability, and a lot of young people really feel that they do not have a stake in the current economic capitalist system, and like generations before them think perhaps socialism is the answer. Now, of course, they're going to be wrong about this, but you cannot argue with the fact that this was the highest turnout in 30 years. And while, I guess Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa took a little bit of the vote from Cuomo, and Cuomo was a certainly flawed candidate, Mamdani walked away with this. So, but not as much to do with Trump as, say, the other two races.
Right, Jennifer. Now, we know that it's been a busy night for American politics and Democrats are celebrating wins in several key races. Now, James, would you say that these results amount to a mini referendum on Trump's presidency?
I think the races should always be looked at as local issues first. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't warning signs for Donald Trump, especially with the kind of minority voters who Zoran Mamdani won clearly last night. Actually, you can see that Donald Trump's favorability ratings have gone really, really down with Black and Latino voters. They were never quite as strong as people made out, but at the same time, he did perform very well with, relative to his previous victory in last year's election with minority voters. So, many of whom had the same concerns as other Republican voters about the economy under Biden. Or even migration. But I think actually this is a sign that Trump is useful for getting out the vote, which is going to be bad in the midterms for the Republicans, because if, he was mentioned on all of their on some of their campaigning materials and in the victory speech, as we just saw. So ultimately, I think this is bad news for Trump and a sign that the Democrats can turn things around if they listen to both the policies and the style that Mamdani offers. However, as we've seen from Chuck Schumer, Senate leader, refusing to say who he voted for, I'm really not confident. And I think the establishment Democrats are Trump's best friends at keeping control of the House and Senate.
Right. We hear you, James. Now, Jennifer, let me come to you. Do you see it that way, or do you see these races as they have been overinterpreted through the Trump lens, so to say?
Well, let's put into context that all three of these races are very blue states. The reason why, so there were no real surprises here. We knew Mamdani would win. I'm pretty sure Spanberger was going to win in Virginia. The only reason we had a Republican governor was because of some school issues around COVID. And then in New Jersey, that's a blue state. Now, Kamala Harris did much worse than Joe Biden. So there was hope that Jack Ciattarelli would do well there. But Again, all three of them are blue states. The issues that Trump is going to have to deal with from, say, just sort of more inside, deep in the weeds Republican politics is this. A lot of his America First voters feel that he's spent too much time on foreign policy, not enough time on basically America First issues, with the exception of closing the border, which has been very, very popular, even amongst Democrats who will not be opening it again. So, no, Trump's got some issues, but I think all of these races, it's too oversimplifying to say that they all had to do with Trump. Keep in mind, these were not midterms. These are what's called off cycle. So while they are kind of the first litmus test, if you will, since the election, which was a year ago today, I think, the Democrats are going to have problems of their own. As your other guest just mentioned, a lot of high-profile Democrats, including Senator Schumer, have not come out and endorsed Mamdani, and they won't because he is a socialist. Things are not going to go well in New York City. And the fact of the matter is both the Republicans and the Democrats are going to need to put forth better candidates going forward. Otherwise, you're going to let a Mamdani slip in, and that's what's happened.
Right, Jennifer, of course, we have to look at the situation in its entirety and can't fall prey to the temptation of taking things out of context. But now we know that Zohran Mamdani has just had a historic win, and this is despite fierce criticism and backlash from the Trump administration. And his campaign has predominantly centered around affordability, which we have just discussed earlier. Affordability in terms of housing, healthcare and wages. And at the same time, the cost of living and immigration, which remain Trump's core talking points as well. Now, having said that, Jennifer, do you think that Trump is losing the affordability battle here as everyday prices continue to bite?
I do, actually. That might surprise you as someone who voted for him, but I think he's got a lot more work to do on that. And that's sort of what I meant a few minutes ago, saying, he's done some wonderful things. Look at his, trip last week in Asia, but affordability is what it comes down to. And when people were polled in a lot of these races, it was like the cost of coffee, the cost of, just basics. People are still struggling a great deal. And Trump, or whoever the incumbent is, we saw it was Biden last time, is going to get the blame for it. So he really needs to get to work, improving the economy over the next year before we get to the midterms, or, the Republicans are done.
Absolutely, Jennifer. Now, James, how do you see this shaping the political narrative heading into the next election cycle?
I do think this is a wake-up call for the establishment Democrats and for Republicans as well, because they have built so much of their campaigning rhetoric around attacking immigrants. New York City is not a bellwether for the entire country. That's true. It's a city made of immigrants. But Mamdani has shown that he's an immigrant himself from Uganda with a South Asian Indian heritage. And he has really shown that immigrants can organize and they don't have to be a force that can just be villainized, but can actually play a role in political life other than just being the people who you see taken off the street by ICE or put into camps by DHS. So I think hopefully this will show a shift of possibility on the issue of immigration and how the Democrats can approach that. But also, I think, a lot of it's about style, right? I mean, one of the main things that we've seen with Mamdani is he's really revolutionized campaigning style. I think we're going to see a lot of copycats of that. We've seen some already around the world. Where I am in Berlin, actually, voters from the politicians from the left party have tried to do it. They've all congratulated Mamdani. But again, as I'm agreeing with your other guests here, affordability is the key issue in American politics. That's also why I believe Joe Biden lost, not focusing on that.
Absolutely. Very valid points there,
sorry,
James.
Kamala Harris.
Right.
And
Thank you so much, Jennifer and James, for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your very valuable perspectives with us.